Wisterias are super popular plants and it's easy to understand why. They're glamorous, they're colourful, they're scented. And what I want to share with you today is how we grow some of the wisterias at Wisley, what goes right and what sometimes goes wrong. My top tip is to buy them when they're in flower, so you see exactly what you're getting. So wisteria come in lots of different colours, lots of different fragrance, different lengths of flower, mostly purples, mauves, some lilacs, some pinks, and then quite a lot of whites as well. Go to a good nursery, find a plant. They will be grafted, and that's so you know you're getting a named variety. So you can see there's a grafted plant here, this is a graft union. Have a look that that's in good condition. And then the wood that's grafted onto this, and when I say grafted, I mean the plant you want is grafted onto a rootstock. So the rootstock might just be seed raised nonsense, that doesn't matter. It's the scion wood that's important. And this will flower, you know, almost from next year onwards. So get a grafted plant, preferably buy it in flower or buy it from somewhere where it's well labelled and you can trust what you're getting is what it says it is. I always like to just check the roots as well, a nice well-rooted plant, and then you're good to go. If you're an impatient kind of person and you need wisteria in your life immediately, you can often buy big specimens of it. Same rules apply, look for a grafted plant, check it's a well-labelled plant, and you know what you're getting. But really, they are so quick growing in the right conditions, so you don't need to buy a big plant. They do flower young and they do grow quick. So pruning of wisteria seems to be a bit of a dark art to some people, and you know what, it is important. If you turn a complete blind eye to pruning techniques of wisteria and you just give it all a good hack back every winter, you'll chop all the flowering buds off and you'll get no flowers. And really, you don't grow wisteria for the foliage. It's pretty dull. So 2 prunes, a summer prune and a winter prune. The winter prune is the most important. It's easier when the leaves are off, you can see what you're doing and you reduce the wood back quite significantly to buds that will then form the flowers. In the summertime, you take back all this whippy growth, but if you don't get to it because you're on a long luxurious holiday for the whole of summer, it doesn't really matter. It's the winter prune that's the most important. So considerations would be, what will you grow your wisteria on? What kind of structure? So normally they're grown on walls. Perfectly good solution. Have wires on the walls to train them along, or a pergola or an arch. But of course in the wild, they're scrambling vines, so they're going to find the nearest tree and they're going to climb the tree. And at Wisley we've got quite a few growing up big oak trees. Here in Oakwood, this is a really old plant that runs to the top of the tree. Now, it is worth considering the host tree. If you're going to put a wisteria up a tree, it needs to be something robust and long-lived. So oak trees are brilliant. Something short-lived and quick-growing like a birch wouldn't be a match made in heaven. The wisteria will overwhelm that eventually and probably pull the whole thing down. So a big, robust oak tree is brilliant. The plant doesn't just flower at the top of the tree, it will flower wherever there's light. So you can see this has been flowering down here where there is light. And it's a spectacular sight to see a tree fully clothed in purple wisteria in the spring. And then you might think, well, how on earth do you prune it? Well, in nature, nobody goes up a tree to prune the wisteria. It's just left to its own devices. And plants are intelligent, so those big long whippy shoots, when they're all up a tree and they're blowing around in the wind, the plant knows there's nothing else for it to grow and attach to. So they will slow down the production of those big long stems, and all the buds form flowers. So the flowering is very profuse. And once it's up the tree, you never need to worry about pruning the wisteria. A rather more practical way of growing a wisteria is by training it up a post. So here, quite a simple timber post. The plant's been trained around it, the stems are being weaved together, and it looks like a freestanding tree from a distance. Spectacular when it flowers. And if you're thinking, yeah, well, that's probably been there 100 years, you're wrong. This went in 1998, and now in 2023, I can't do the maths, but it's probably not as old as you were thinking. So there's almost no excuse not to have a wisteria. So, okay, maybe you don't have a grand house, maybe you don't have a huge wall garden, maybe you don't have a pergola. Let's face it, who does? But you can grow a wisteria as a freestanding tree. As you can see here, basically it's grown as a standard, so on a stem, You get a lovely head of foliage. When this flowers, it's incredible in the spring. And then in the winter time, you just have the burst structure. Or if you have a really small garden, this can be your answer to a small tree. So behind me is classic situation, wisteria on wall, a big house here on the Wisley laboratory. But I'm not going to lie to you, it is a big pruning commitment. There's a lot of work there. They're vigorous plants. That wants to be in the gutters around the window, scrambling up the chimneys. But I must say, if you can find the time or you're good at going up ladders to do that pruning, there is nothing else like seeing a big, dark purple wisteria on a red brick wall. And that is a good point. Just think about the positioning. You do see people put white flowered wisterias against white walls. Not the best use of them. So think about the backdrop. But if all that pruning commitment, going up ladders makes you feel ill, a smaller wisteria, a half standard wisteria might be for you. And a half standard wisteria can also go in a pot. These are so easy to manage, so quick and simple to prune. All the excitement of wisteria flowers happens here. And as long as they're in a sunny spot, like I said, these can go in a large container or a pot for a balcony or a patio garden. So we're here on the wisteria walk at Wisley. This, believe it or not, is only 6 years old. So again, if you're thinking it takes hundreds of years for wisteria to grow, while they live for hundreds of years, they do grow very quickly. And back to my point of choosing things when they're in flower, even at Wisley, when we bought all these, they were labelled, we thought we had all the exact varieties we wanted. When they flowered, it turned out about a quarter of them were wrong. So it is, they even dare send wrongly named stuff to Wisley. It's so key to buy them in flower if you can. And then really they're generally easy plants to please. So water them in for the first couple of summers if it's dry, but once they're established, they are incredibly resilient and they will grow in full sun, very hot conditions. They'll flower better in full sun. The only conditions really to avoid are really waterlogged soils or growing them in very, very shady spots. You won't get much flower off them in full shade. So what can go wrong with wisteria? Well, while the plants are hardy, which means they survive for your average UK winter, the flower buds are not hardy, which is why traditionally wisterias are grown against warm walls. So when you get a frost in April or early May, generally the flower buds survive. So it's a bit of a lottery if you're growing them in an open situation like this or on a pergola. So a couple of points here. If your garden is cold and you get later frosts, you could plant a white flowered wisteria. White always flowers later than the purple, so they're later into bud, they often then escape those late frosts. At Wisley, we got quite frustrated with this whole wisteria walk being frosted by the cold. So actually this year in 2023, we had some fire pits out here with some waste wood from the garden that we burnt over 2 nights of frost, which actually generated just enough heat to keep those flower buds free of frost. I'm not suggesting you be doing this at home, but in a very cold garden, grow it against a warm wall or plant a white flowered variety. Now my final tip to give you, and don't worry, this isn't going to be a lesson in botany, but very quickly, the wisteria species you're going to come across are Wisteria sinensis and floribunda. Those Asian origin wisterias are your classic wisterias. They flower in the spring, they have the long pendant flowers. But the other plant you might come across is Wisteria frutescens, which is native to America, and that flowers throughout the summer months. So a peppering of flowers all through the summer, needs a very, very hot wall, and is generally much smaller growing. So I hope that's given you some tips and hacks to try at home. Maybe you've learned something new, but most of all, I hope it's given you inspiration to try a wisteria at home.